So let's talk about a mission that was somehow a huge success and a total failure, all at the same time. Yeah, you heard that right. Blue Origin's latest New Glenn flight gave us these two completely opposite stories, and we're going to break down exactly what happened. All right, so just picture this for a second. It's a beautiful Sunday morning down in Cape Canaveral. You've got crowds gathered on the beach, the sun's coming up, and there on the launch pad is Blue Origin's giant New Glenn rocket. You can just feel the excitement in the air, right? Everyone's expecting a perfect flight. And you know what? At first, that's exactly what they got, a totally flawless flight. This was the third launch for the New Glenn, and it was just picture perfect, lifting right off from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, right on schedule. And the sheer power on display? Wow. I mean, we're talking about its 7 BE-4 engines just igniting with this ground-shaking roar, pushing that massive rocket skyward with an incredible 3.8 million pounds of thrust. Just an absolutely awesome thing to see. But this launch was also a really big deal for the company for another reason. See, this was the very first time Blue Origin was actually reflying a first-stage booster. And in the modern space race, you gotta understand reusability is everything. It's the absolute key to bringing down costs and launching more often. So yeah, this was a huge test for them. Okay, but the rocket going up, that was really only half the story. The most impressive part, the real showstopper of the day, was still to come. Getting that massive, reusable first stage back down to Earth in one piece. And this whole process, it's like a high-tech ballet, seriously. About 3 minutes after launch, that first stage separates. Then it has to fly itself, totally autonomously, back through the atmosphere. It reignites its engines for what they call a landing burn, to slow way down, all while aiming for this tiny landing barge sitting hundreds of miles out in the Atlantic Ocean. No pressure, right? And they absolutely nailed it. I mean, this is where you see their engineering shine. Just a little over 9 minutes after it launched, that booster made a perfect pinpoint landing right on the target. And get this was the second time this specific booster had done it successfully. It proved, without a doubt, that their reusable tech works. A total 100% triumph. But while the teams at Blue Origin were celebrating this incredible landing, the mission's second stage, the part actually carrying the satellite, was still on its journey. And this, right here, is where the story takes a sharp and pretty painful turn. So you have to be asking, right? With a perfect launch and a perfect landing, where on earth did it all go wrong? Well, the problem wasn't with that amazing booster. It happened much, much higher and a whole lot later in the flight. This timeline really puts it all into perspective. Look, the first stage landing, that was all done just 9 minutes in. The failure, that happened over an hour later. The upper stage was supposed to fire its engine a second time to push the satellite into its final correct orbit. And that just didn't go as planned. You know, that's one of the hardest things to do in any mission, reigniting an engine in the freezing vacuum of space. The result of that failed burn is something engineers call an off-nominal orbit. All that really means is that the orbit was wrong. To put it simply, the rocket's upper stage just didn't have enough oomph to push its payload high enough. It dropped the satellite off in an orbit that was way too low to be useful or even sustainable. And the consequence of being in that low orbit, well, it was catastrophic for the entire point of the mission, which was, of course, to deliver a very expensive and very sophisticated satellite. Yeah, the payload that was lost was the Bluebird 7 satellite, which belonged to a company called AST Space Mobile. And this wasn't just some run-of-the-mill satellite. This thing was designed to beam 4G and 5G service directly to regular cell phones from space. It had this gigantic 2,400 square foot antenna. It was a really important piece of a whole planned global network. The satellite's owner, AST Space Mobile, pretty much confirmed the worst. They put out a statement saying, "The altitude is too low to sustain operations and will deorbit." So yeah, it was a total loss, destined to just burn up in the atmosphere. The only silver lining for them? The satellite was fully insured. So, okay, you've got this perfectly recovered booster on one hand and a completely lost satellite on the other. What does this weird mixed result actually mean for Jeff Bezos' company? And where does it leave them in this super competitive space race? You really can't look at this in a vacuum, right? Blue Origin is going head-to-head with Elon Musk's SpaceX on pretty much every front. Heavy lift rockets, satellite internet, even building lunar landers for NASA. Every slip-up, every failure is a chance for the competition to get ahead. And this failure, it's actually pretty telling. Mastering that spectacular booster landing is incredible, don't get me wrong, but it's the less glamorous upper stage that actually delivers the payload and makes the money. And that's a critical gap they now have to prove they can close. And that New Glenn rocket is just absolutely critical to Blue Origin's future plans. It's supposed to launch a test flight for their Blue Moon lander, it's supposed to start deploying Amazon's own internet satellite constellation, and it's their ticket to winning big government contracts. Now, all of those plans are pretty much on hold, facing delays until they figure out exactly what went wrong with that upper stage. And that really brings us to the final bottom line question, doesn't it? Blue Origin proved its reusable booster tech is world-class, but the failure of that upper stage cost them the entire mission. So can they find and fix this critical flaw fast enough to keep all their ambitious plans on track? Or is this setback going to let their rivals pull even further ahead? Because one thing's for sure, the race to space waits for absolutely no one.